Welcome back. We are now joined by Brother Hassan Choonara, who's coming to us from Syria. Brother Hassan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Brother Farhaz. Shukran for having us on Hilaal TV. Always a pleasure.
No, absolute pleasure. I think, Brother Hassan, Syria, of course, it's a new leadership, a new change that is happening within that country. So talk to us about the mission that you guys are undertaking at this moment.
Alhamdulillah, I'm in Syria at the moment with some brothers from South Africa as well as from Australia, together with our Lebanon team, facilitating and continuing the efforts on the ground. Alhamdulillah, as you mentioned, a new change in Syria. And as a result, many of the refugee families from Lebanon are returning home to what was once a beautiful home. Some families perhaps have land, but when coming to their homes, it's just a pile of rock. Some families don't have any means or any land or any family to go to, and makes the journey back home a lot more difficult in having to find space for them and trying to get these families back onto their feet. As you know, families cannot stay longer in Lebanon, in the camps, past the end of the year. And so the assistance to these families to get back to Syria and to start their lives to some sort of normality with dignity. Sometimes the perception for us is that when the people are going home, Syria is open, sanctions are being lifted, so things are okay. Unfortunately, that's far from the truth. It's a very difficult situation at the moment. And so the AMA teams on the ground, African Muslims Agency here at the offices and the teams are assisting these families in terms of day-to-day needs, but also empowerment projects that are ongoing.
Yeah, I was going to ask on, obviously, we heard this week at the United Nations General Assembly, Syria's interim president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, calling on more nations to lift those sanctions. But, I don't want to get into the political part of this, Brother Hassan, but, the lifting of the sanctions are not enough because Syria has been destroyed so badly that displacement has become the order of the day, number one. And number two, even returning home, they have to rebuild their lives. So how does AMA assist with regards to that?
On many fronts. One is obviously infrastructural assistance. We are constructing or assisting in the construction of boreholes in certain areas. Right now in the Al Qusair area where the office is based, the construction of boreholes to farmlands. Over the years, unfortunately, many of the farmers who had orchards, farm orchards, etc., their farms completely destroyed. The proceeds from that used to be for beneficial for their families and communities and villages. Unfortunately, towns that have been completely destroyed, the boreholes completely destroyed. And so AMA assisting in the construction of boreholes there, as well as the rehabilitation of masajid in Al Qusair area as we speak. There's only 3 functional masjids in Al Qusair at the moment, and a majority of it all completely destroyed. But talk about, we know that right now the authorities in Syria is focusing on economic growth, and rightfully so. As people come back, they need to some sort of assistance in getting back to a life of normality. Right now, as you speak, the hard fix, we just seen many families with the trucks going back to Syria. But when they go home, for us, they go back to their land. Many of them still having keys to their home. They get to their house and they just see a pile of rock, perhaps carrying their tent with them from Lebanon, pitching up a tent outside. The condition they'll be living in now is far worse than what they had back at the camps in Lebanon. But obviously, people want to go home and want to start a life. And it's not easily, there's no readily available jobs in these areas. There's no functioning council, there's no functioning infrastructure. And so you're living in just barren land, completely destroyed, and trying to make ends meet. So right now, at least for the foreseeable future, to help these families with the day-to-day needs and assistance, and inshallah over the longer term, to empower them so they become independent. At least, from the last 13, 14, 15 years being dependent, finally to become a family of independence and start children going back to school and start having some sort of normality in these towns in Syria.
Yeah, you talk about normality, Hafiz Hassan. I think what's important is over the last few decades, the Assad regime has really suppress so much of the Syrian people. How is AMA helping in terms of psychosocial support? Because, the trauma is still quite large.
Absolutely, a very important point. Sometimes going home doesn't make things okay. Going home and having a hamper there and food means doesn't make things okay. Pitching up a tent or rehabilitating a house doesn't make things okay. Remember, these children have been abused or witnessed trauma. These families have lost loved ones. They perhaps left Syria as a whole family and returned to Syria with many family members no longer there. It's not going back to see your grandfather and grandparents and uncles and aunts. They're coming back to a very different situation. 14 years, 15 years away from your land and away from your loved ones. Some of them reuniting after more than a decade. And so there's a lot of trauma that's been experienced by either the young children or the elders. And so helping them with psychosocial services in terms of dealing with the trauma that they've experienced or witnessed over the last decade, and to help them to then be in a good mental space to start living. Providing the means, providing the job opportunity, empowering them with skills, empowering them with microfinancing or micro startup businesses doesn't make things okay if upstairs, if the mental space is not in a good space. And obviously that's very key for African Muslims. It always has been in situations like we find ourselves in. Just today, entered Syria, spending time in Lebanon over the last few days, but seeing the number of trucks of people trying to put ends meet to get these trucks to put their tents, their mattresses, their blankets, whatever they could put together, and a truck, and now journey back to Syria. Some of them coming back to the land after more than a decade. Some of the children know that Syria was their home, but were never born in Syria, were born in a refugee camp, and so it's new terrain, new territory. And some of them eagerly speak about, I'm going to take this bedroom and that bedroom, because they have the picture of what their house was many years ago. But sad reality is, when they get to that plot, to that land, there's nothing but rock.
Hafiz Hassan, one final question for, obviously the rebuilding of Syria. AMA has been in Syria for a very, very long time. I think the challenge becomes even more difficult now, doesn't it? Because the rebuilding phase is always the most difficult vis-a-vis that when they were living, of course, through the civil war.
Absolutely, and that's why we humbly appeal to the viewers out there to continue supporting the AMA efforts on the ground in Lebanon and Syria. With your support, we're able to empower these families. Just to try to explain what they're going through. For us, we talk about rebuilding of Syria. We sat with families in a camp in Lebanon yesterday. And alhamdulillah, some families already have a plot to go to, land to go to, family to go to. But there are families that were Syrian, who were affected by the war, staying in the refugee camp in Lebanon for the last 14, 15 years. But there's no land to go to, no home to go to, no family to go to. And within a few months, they would have to leave Lebanon, because that's the rule that's been given. Where do they go to? When they go to Syria, there's nothing. They do not have means to rent an apartment or a space, and already having challenges with children, having multiple challenges in terms of maybe health, etc. And we looked at these families yesterday. There was one such lady. Unfortunately, her husband deserted her and left her with 3 young children. She's only 18 years old, all alone, having to already fend for herself and paying the rent for the tent. I say rent for the tent, but it's just 4 sheets, cement floor with a straw mat, and finding difficulty. And in the next few months, she has to find the means and the courage to go back home to Syria and find a space, find a home, and start putting her children some sort of education. And this is the reality of many, many families. So as we know, Syria has opened up, does not mean things are okay. People need our help now. And AIM is on the ground facilitating these projects and campaigns to assist these families, and we need your support.
Hafiz Hassan, all the best for you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you success in your mission in doing your part to help rebuild Syria. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
شكرا for having us. تقبل الله منا منكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
That's Hafiz Hassan Choonara, who is from Africa Muslims Agency. That's all we have for you here on Know Your Charity from myself, Ross Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.